I give all her money to my wife. That was the first thing I heard as I stepped onto the patio with a tray of lemonade glasses. Laughter followed. A few heads turned toward me, but no one offered help, not even my son. He raised his glass, smiling as if it were a joke worth repeating. My brother Beck was seated near the edge of the group, his hand pausing halfway to his mouth. He didn't laugh. He looked at me. Really looked. I kept walking. I set the tray down on the buffet table and turned away. The table was full, salads, pastries, sparkling water, but there was no plate for me. There never was. Vanessa had said it clearly that morning. It's just close friends and colleagues, Marlene. If you don't mind helping with setup, that would be amazing. So I'd set out napkins, polished silverware, and arranged lemon slices while they got dressed upstairs. When Beck showed up unannounced, Vanessa stiffened but smiled through it. Well, now it's a family brunch, she'd said. But only some family, it seemed. Later, Beck followed me out back. He hadn't been to Oregon in over a decade. Not since Mom's funeral. You live out here? He asked, peering into the studio. I nodded. The place was tidy but small. One burner stove. No proper fridge. Just a cooler box I refilled with ice. He opened the pantry door and stared inside. A few cans. Some rice. That was it. Why are you starving with an $8,000 pension? He asked, voice low. I didn't know what to say. Or maybe I did. But the words stuck somewhere between shame and disbelief. I gave a small shrug. Beck didn't push. He just stood there quietly, hands in his pockets. That night, after the guests left, I sat alone with a cup of weak tea and turned the old manila envelope over in my hands. The one labeled, Trust Mother's Estate. I hadn't touched it in years, but I remembered every line inside. The next morning I stood in my kitchenette, waiting for the water to boil. The kettle took longer than usual, or maybe I was just noticing it for the first time. This little space, once meant for weekend guests, had become my life. When I'd signed the deed over to Caleb and Vanessa, it was with the idea that I'd stay here for a few months while I looked for something smaller. Caleb had kissed my cheek and said, You'll always have a place with us. Vanessa had nodded. That was 3 years ago. I still paid the utility bills. Water trash, even the gardener. I still folded their towels when the dryer beeped, still ran the occasional errand when Vanessa texted me from the salon. In return, they let me live in the shed I bought. They said the rent I paid helped cover property taxes, though the checks I slipped under the kitchen door were always left uncashed on my counter days later, like some twisted act of generosity. That day, I noticed things I hadn't before. Every drawer I opened was empty. My casserole dish gone. The extra bedding vanished. Even the pale green towels I'd bought for the guest bath had disappeared from the linen closet weeks ago. When I asked Vanessa, she'd smiled and said, they must have gotten mixed in with the Airbnb set. I didn't argue. But standing there now in a room that used to feel like part of something larger, I realized how much had been erased. The light bulbs still worked. The floor was still clean, but the sense of belonging was hollow. That night, I took the manila envelope from the back of my drawer and laid it on the table. The label was faded, but still clear. Trust Mother's Estate. I opened it and read every page slowly from the notarized front page to the last ledger line. Vanessa called it a treat. It's been ages since just the two of us had lunch, she said, all brightness and lipstick smiles. I knew better than to ask why now. Still, I agreed. The table was already reserved when we arrived. She ordered sparkling water with lime before I could sit. She talked about the usual things, her new position at the firm. Caleb's long hours, the neighbor's barking dog. I nodded in the right places. My salad barely moved. Then her voice shifted. Polite, but thinner. There's been talk, she said, about what to do with the shed. I mean the guest house. It's not the most efficient setup anymore. Between the taxes, utilities, zoning, It just doesn't make sense. I said nothing. She leaned in, lowering her voice as if offering a favor. We thought, if you sold it off or transferred it, things would be simpler. We could help you find something cozier. Maybe in a senior community, heated pool garden access. Relocate where I asked. My fork hovered midair. Vanessa didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her leather tote and pulled out a folded document. Just a quick authorization, she said, sliding the paper toward me. It's just to adjust the trust for clarity. Makes future legal stuff easier. I looked down. My name was printed cleanly at the top, and there at the bottom was my signature. But I hadn't signed it. I never signed this, I said, not loud. Just clear. Vanessa didn't flinch. She sipped her drink and tilted her head. I think you did, she replied, her tone soft enough to sound generous, sharp enough to end the conversation. I folded the paper once then again and placed it beside my untouched plate. She smiled like it was settled. But my appetite was long gone. Beck showed up the next morning with 2 paper cups of coffee. He didn't bother knocking. You were up early, he said, stepping inside. I nodded. The envelope and Vanessa's forged document still sat on the table. He set the coffee down and studied me for a long moment. You know, the bank called me yesterday, he said finally. They said I was still listed as an emergency contact for Mom's estate. That caught my attention. They sent me an alert, he continued. Did you know Mom left you her savings account? Not just the trust, the cash account too. I shook my head. No, I didn't know. Beck frowned and pulled a folded printout from his jacket. Someone's been moving the money. Small withdrawals every month for almost 3 years. The statements list joint care and housing aid. Ring any bells, I felt the back of my neck grow warm. I didn't have access to that account anymore. I hadn't since we combined household finances to make things easier, as Caleb had put it. We sat side by side at the little kitchen table. Beck scrolled through transactions on his phone, reading dates and amounts out loud. Each one landed like a tap on glass, soft but unrelenting. The pattern was clear. Vanessa's name on transfer notes, a matching date to a handbag charge I remembered seeing on her credit card receipt months ago. The numbers lined up too neatly to be chance. I didn't speak. Beck didn't press. He just watched me, his jaw tight. Then he took out his phone again, opened his contacts and said, I'm calling Martin. He's still practicing law in Portland. Beck. I don't want to start a war, I whispered. You're not starting one, he said quietly. You're already in it. He stepped outside to make the call. Through the window, I watched him pace the gravel path between my shed and the house that used to be mine. When he came back in, he looked calmer. Focused. Martin will meet us tomorrow morning, he said. Bring everything you have. I glanced toward the drawer where the old leather folder waited. The folder was still where I left it, wrapped in an old towel behind the winter blankets. I had almost forgotten about it, almost. It was one of the last things my mother gave me back when her handwriting was still strong, when she still remembered what day it was. The leather had dried slightly at the corners, but the contents were intact. I laid them out on the bed, receipts, letters, wire confirmations. Every trust disbursement had been documented. Every emergency my son called me crying about there in black and white. Hospital copay, credit card debt, car repairs. The final page in the stack was a floral invoice from their wedding. My name was on the payment line. I remembered canceling my trip to see Margaret in Santa Fe just to afford it. I opened my laptop, the one Beck bought me years ago. I hadn't used it much. Caleb said anything I needed could go through their accounts. It made taxes easier. That was what he always said. It took a few tries to remember my password, but I got in. The first thing I did was reopen an account in my name only. Then I called the bank and froze the joint ones. They gave me a case number. I scanned every page of the folder and sent them to my accountant. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but he still answered like I'd called last week. By noon, 3 institutions had flagged my name as part of active investigations. The words unauthorized withdrawal and account misuse were in bold across the emails I received. I didn't say anything to Caleb or Vanessa. I didn't confront them. Instead, I sat by the shed window that Sunday while they hosted another brunch. White tablecloths music drifting through open windows, champagne glasses clinking in the distance. I watched the guests come and go. Watched Caleb refill drinks like a proud host. Watched Vanessa gesture to the property like she owned it. And I sat still, hands folded, eyes clear, as if waiting for something that had already begun. The law office was smaller than I remembered. The walls seemed closer together, lined with thick files and shelves of old case binders. It smelled like dry paper and burnt coffee. I sat on a vinyl chair near the front desk while the paralegal rifled through a drawer. She looked up and smiled softly. "I kept your file under Cray," she said. "Didn't want to risk mixing it with your married name. Some things are too important to lose." The folder she handed me was heavier than I expected. Inside were the originals my mother's signed trust the amendment clause, the financial instructions she'd written in her own shaky hand. I flipped to the page I needed. The trust had never been revoked. It had been adjusted, but the adjustment wasn't legal. The signature on the amendment didn't match any of mine. The original beneficiary had always been me. Not joint, not conditional, not temporary. Martin, the attorney Beck recommended, joined us in the small conference room. He reviewed everything quickly, then slid over a new document with a sticky note that read, "Signature plus notary, Fracture's full restoration." My pen didn't hesitate. One line, one signature, and the house was mine again. So was the pension, the savings account, the inheritance my mother left behind now, free of interference. It felt strange to hold power again. Not dramatic, not triumphant, just grounded. I thanked the paralegal as I stood. Her smile lingered, knowing. Outside, the light was sharp and clear. A breeze carried the scent of early spring, cut grass and damp soil. The street looked the same, but I didn't feel like the same woman who had arrived that morning. My name, my real name, was finally where it belonged, but I wasn't done yet. There were still documents to file, and brunch, after all, was just a few days away. The invitations went out earlier that week. Vanessa's firm had made her partner, and they were throwing a party to match. White tents covered the patio. Floral arrangements framed the French doors. A hired quartet played soft music near the fountain, and servers moved through the crowd with trays of champagne flutes and shrimp skewers. I wasn't on the guest list. Again, Vanessa left a note taped to my door that morning. "Please avoid walking through the main house today. Thanks for understanding." I read it, folded it once and slipped it into my pocket. By 3 o'clock, the house buzzed with clinking glasses and curated laughter. I waited until the second toast was finished before I stepped out. I didn't carry a tray. I didn't wear an apron. I carried a manila envelope. Caleb saw me first. His expression faltered, then smoothed into something forced. "Mom, maybe not right now," he whispered, glancing toward Vanessa. I handed him the envelope. "It's a full audit," I said quietly, "and a property reassignment." His hands stiffened around the papers. "What is this?" "Everything you already know," I said. Outside the front gate, Martin stood by the walkway in a charcoal suit holding a second copy. I had asked him not to enter the property, just to observe and deliver the legal duplicate. When Caleb didn't move, I nodded toward the drive. "He has one too." I turned and walked back toward the shed. No shouting followed me. No footsteps either. By dusk, the patio lights were dimmed. The quartet packed up early. The guests slipped out without dessert. Vanessa's voice didn't carry down the gravel like it used to. The house had gone quiet. That night, I logged into the old joint account. The balance read 0 euros. There were no explanations, no denials. Just silence. The next morning, I brewed coffee and opened the kitchen drawer to retrieve the list of institutions I still needed to notify. I didn't change the locks. Not yet. Instead, I let the mail do its work. One envelope at a time. A flagged account from the credit union, a tax irregularity notice, a letter from the county clerk confirming the reassignment of property ownership. I stacked each one neatly in a folder marked Delivered. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. 3 mornings after the party, Caleb knocked on the shed's door. He looked tired, not unwell, just deflated. His hair wasn't styled, and his voice was softer than usual. "Can we talk?" he asked. I opened the door halfway. "You may want to call your lawyer," I said. He didn't argue. He just stood there for a few seconds looking past me into the small space he never bothered to visit before. Then he nodded and walked away. 2 days later, the movers arrived. A quiet truck, no logos. They didn't ask questions. Vanessa wasn't there. Or maybe she was and chose not to be. I watched from the porch of the main house. Beck sat beside me holding a mug of tea he'd brewed from my old tin. We didn't talk much. The breeze was light, and the sound of boxes being taped shut felt far away. At one point, a silver SUV slowed at the curb. Vanessa's car. She looked toward the house, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Then she pressed the gas and drove on. I didn't lift my hand. I didn't rise. The truck pulled out just before dusk. No one knocked to say goodbye. Beck stood stretched and said he'd head back to his hotel. I watched him walk the gravel path to his car, steady and sure. The house behind me was quiet, still mine. Inside, the fridge was humming, and the oven blinked 12 Suro, waiting to be reset. I stood up, walked back inside, and began cleaning the pantry shelves one by one. The first night back in the main house, I slept in the guest room. Not out of habit, just hesitation. It felt strange walking across those floors again, opening cabinets I used to stock flipping switches I once paid for. The next morning, I stripped the sheets in the master bedroom and started fresh. Clean linens, a plain quilt, the curtains drawn wide. I carried the guest towels back to the linen closet. Most were still folded the way I left them 3 years ago, though some had made their way into Caleb and Vanessa's bathroom, mismatched and stained. I replaced them without comment. A photo of my mother now sits in the front hallway, just beside the light switch. She's holding a cup of tea in the garden, laughing, hair pinned back loosely. I hadn't looked at that picture in years, but now it felt like a small anchor. The shed out back is still unlocked. I haven't decided what to do with it. Maybe I'll turn it into a workspace, or maybe I'll leave it as it is for a while. Beck came by again that week. We moved through the checklist together, updated the utilities, disconnected the secondary billing profiles, rerouted the mail. He helped me lift an old dresser out of storage and walk the perimeter with me, making quiet notes about repairs and leaks. He didn't say much, just made sure I had everything I needed before heading back to Portland. The yard is still. No catering vans, no delivery cars double parked in the driveway. No music drifting from open doors. Just quiet. I spent the afternoon reorganizing the pantry, scrubbing the tile grout, and making a list of what I'd keep and what I'd donate. In the evening, I opened all the windows. The breeze was soft, cool. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the porch light turn itself on. Tomorrow I'd go to the bank to finalize the last of the paperwork. The pension would follow. So would the final title confirmations. I planted the tree just after sunrise. Not for shade. Not for flowers. I didn't choose it for the fruit. I chose it because it would grow right there by the kitchen window where I could see it every morning. A living marker. Not of beauty, but of presence. Of staying. The soil was dry but soft. The roots settled quickly. I watered it twice. Once for now, once for what's coming. Inside, I placed the audit folder in a fireproof box and slid it beneath the bed in the master room. Not out of fear, just certainty. The box holds every record, every notice, every copy of what they thought I wouldn't keep. And now it also holds my name restored and signed. The new will was simple. So was the new trust. No vague language, no family clauses. I made sure of it. Irrevocable. The title matches the land. The land matches the deed. There's no room for confusion. I brewed coffee and opened the kitchen blinds. The driveway was clear. No suitcases by the door. No engine sounds in the distance. Just the sound of a quiet house filling with light. I walked the hallway, pausing near the framed photo of my mother. She'd grown up on land like this, nothing extravagant but earned. That kind of memory stays in the bones. I stood for a long moment near the front window, hands warm from the mug, watching the lemon tree catch the wind. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. Done with asking, done with hoping someone would see the work behind the smile. There's no one left to update. No one waiting to be told. Later that afternoon, I took the last remaining set of spare keys and dropped them into an envelope. Then I slid it into the shed's mailbox, still unlocked just in case.